Hey folks, this is Jay again with a little bit of my new learnings and new thoughts on GPT. That's kind of seems to be the rage and the topic of conversation at all levels, from my family to work to everywhere else to friends. So a few more thoughts on what I have found out while playing around with GPT and laying out a vision and a roadmap for GPT for everything I do. First thing, let's just summarize on what GPT can do and what GPT cannot do. What GPT things which GPT can do very, very well uh, is expanding on a topic. So if you as a user have some idea on what GPT is or what LLM is or a large language model is, then it will expand on that idea very, very well. For example, I asked recently on kind of pros and cons of eating gluten-free food if my goal is weight loss, and it was very well. It expanded that idea into some pros and cons, and then things I should be thinking about and things like that. So that's number one. Number two is it is great on generating content from one or two ideas or thoughts. So this conversation which I am having, or typically a product like your phone's documentation on how to enable a feature and things like that, it is great at generating documentation. It is also great in transformational activities. For example, you have a document written in English, you want to translate it in Mandarin or Hindi or some other documentation. It is amazing at transforming such content. It is also great at summarizing a very large, say a government policy or a vision which is written in a few pages. It is great at summarizing the key points on that. And last but not least, it also infers very well. So things like say a company has two products and an iPhone and an iPad, and you could feed the documentation and ask it to infer that, hey, depending on this, tell me if this particular app will work in both the phones and things like that. So inferring from the information which is provided around, it is amazing at. Also, what I believe is all these points which I said, from expanding to generating new content documentation, to transforming content translations, to summarizing, to inferring, I feel all these activities, it is just matter of time where the tool will become so good that it is going to fundamentally change the business model. So what I mean by that is that if you are working in these areas, not only will you need to change in the short term, change your ways of working by having an assistant to do kind of the mundane jobs, but you would also have to very, very quickly, like within, not in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years, within the year, my advice for you is to change what your industry is, because I fundamentally believe this is going to change the industry's business model itself. By that, what I mean is that to question, why do you need product documentation at all? Why do you need a person to summarize a piece of paper when you have a chatting interface where you can ask anything and it will give you the reply of what you want? So you don't need to pre-summarize a piece of document. You don't need to pre-translate something when you can translate live. So that's something to remember when we are thinking about what GPT can do and cannot do. I feel the 5 areas which I just discussed, from expanding to inferring, these areas are going to fundamentally change. And if you are in this industry, you need to figure out on what your next step in your career is, because the business model is changing. as of now I'm going to make it very clear on what it cannot do now, but I would add it with a caveat that it cannot do as of now. I am pretty sure that the way technologies change, it will be able to do these things, but it may take some time, but it will. What it cannot do just now is answer why, right? Why is it giving you some answer and why is it not giving you some other answer? Because it is based on a large language model, the problem of figuring out why it has come up with this answer is an empirical problem, and to solve empirical problem at this level, at such a large language model, it is going to require new hardware, and maybe it's a topic of a separate podcast on why a thing like a quantum computer or a more transistor in 1 nanometer is the way to go to infer as to why some of these answers are coming. Number two, it cannot process your data. That is the job of a typical CPU, where it can take your data, move it around databases and process on it and things like that. It also cannot do management tasks. So if you tell it to say, hey, I have these 20 tasks, these are its dependencies, and these are the stakeholders. So if somebody gets blocked and somebody needs to get an answer, that's not a job it can do. It can also forecast, things which is very which is not dependent on 100% facts or 100% or has some probability built into it. It cannot do those jobs, especially things like forecasting and things like that. We also have things like executing like a day-to-day task on a daily basis, every day. Those are things which are not built for GPT. And last but not least, it also cannot handle sensitivity. If you want to have a sensitive conversation or handle emotions or show emotions or really complex topics which can wander around and then come back, the GPT is not made yet, I would say, yet for that. So once again, 4 or 5 things it cannot do. It cannot answer why is it coming, or why or how did it come with this conclusion. Number 2, it is also not a processing engine like it's not a workhorse where it can process stuff. It doesn't do project management like tasks, dependency management like tasks. It cannot create a forecast for you because it is not always built on 100% facts. It cannot execute jobs for you, or day-to-day timely jobs, things like that. And last but not least, it cannot handle complex or emotional or sensitive topics that well. Before I let you guys go, a couple of more thoughts on what I have learned from GPT as of now is that it almost feels like how the smartphone came in, right? Like, from BlackBerry to iPhone, and then iPhone, it just suddenly took off. It almost feels like that when iPhone came out, there was no copy paste or there was no developer apps. There were a bunch of stuff missing, but it could do 2 or 3 things very, very well. And then what the phones at that time, like Nokia and BlackBerry, said is, oh, this is something which we will yield these 2 or 3 things like browsing or music. We don't want to be in that business. We want to be in this really well typing kind of a business. So they went kind of up in the value chain and left kind of the low margin work which they were not going to make much money on. They left it to iPhone, and then iPhone slowly improved, and then it pushed those other phones and things like that out of the market. So it has the very similar feel, but in this case it's going to push humans out of those particular jobs which the humans are doing just now. So it feels very well where humans are going to say, oh, that's low margin work, that's the mundane work, let me give it to GPT and I'll do the critical thinking. But as it gets better, I think it's going to push the humans out of certain jobs, certain industries completely. That's number one. The other thought I had is I also feel that this might be a fight back of the idea economy. So since a long time, since I think 2000s, I have always heard a lot of folks say that ideas are dime a dozen, execution is hard. But looks like ideas and the folks with ideas and that kind of thinking is back with a vengeance, because now I think it, because execution can be automated, you can actually say ideas is what's going to matter. And last but not least, also we will see this slow progression, but what GPT is going to start with is it's going to be like a Lego block in doing, because we are already overburdened, we already have a lot of tasks. It's going to plug in very nicely in our workflow for doing A task or B task as a very modular component in the workflow of different industries. But slowly, what I predict is going to happen is it's going to, certain workflows, it's going to completely take over. It's not going to stay only in its level, and it's going to slowly move as to be a completely integrated process and system. And after some new technology comes or a new disruption comes, it will break down into a modular component once again. So tell me, how did you guys like these thoughts? Again, like, share, subscribe. That helps kind of get the conversation going. I'm willing to collaborate if you think I'm missing something. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.